Get off your fucking phone. We're recording.
I'm putting sleep mode on.
Harry Sudock. Hello, man.
Hey.
How you doing?
This is good.
Every time we come back to New York, we get Harry back on the podcast now.
Well, when I live in a new city, you're going to have to come somewhere else frequently.
We don't have to talk where that is. Are you secret?
I am strongly looking towards the great state of Tennessee.
Thought you were going to say that. I think you told me that last time. Nashville, man. Well, you can go to Bitcoin Park, go to the Bitcoin meetup there.
I love Bitcoin Park. I love Rod.
Rod's
and Mills.
amazing.
They crush.
Have you seen how thin and athletic Rod's got?
He's my inspiration. He's all over the 1 meal a day thing.
Yeah.
He's like, he texted me the other day and he's like, I'm just so addicted to the gym right now.
He looks good, man.
He looks really good.
He looks really good. But we went to Bitcoin Park, me and Danny. They've killed it, what they've done there, him and Odell. And
it's so impressive.
yeah, very impressive. Well, look, that will be another reason not to come to New York.
There you go. There's no one left.
There's no one left. There's fewer and fewer reasons to come to New York these days.
I know.
Sad, man. Well, listen, that's funny, actually. Like we were saying, when I first started the pod, it used to be fly to New York, do a bunch of interviews. I'd maybe go to Florida and do one. Maybe go to Texas and do 2. Then I'd go to LA and do 6. And, maybe go to San Francisco and Portland, and then I'd go home. That was kind of like, they were the places. But it's not that anymore. Now it's Austin, Nashville, Miami. They're the 3 main places to go.
I bet Vegas is going to climb that list.
Well, we know one person there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know one person there. I don't know if he's public, so I won't say it. But, Vegas would be cool. We're always happy to go to Vegas. Going to be there in November. LA's still good. I think some people can't give up the beach. I think they still want to pay 68% tax, whatever the fuck they do.
California's a shitcoin.
California is a shitcoin, but, some of us like a little bit shitcoin in. And I still like LA. I do. It's California. It's a beautiful place. Beautiful people. I'll still keep going there, man. Anyway, dude, we need to talk about mining again. Your specialty subject.
It hasn't gotten boring yet.
It's funny as well because it's like, I remember somebody set up a mining podcast a while back. I was like, what are you going to talk about? Like mining is a subtopic of Bitcoin. I can cover that. How are you going to cover that every week? I totally get it now. It's his own like wild industry that's spawned all these things we didn't even expect. How do you take it all in?
I think about it very similarly to Bitcoin, where I showed up for Bitcoin for the sweet financial gains, and ended up eating steak and reshaping all these different areas that I thought I had a good understanding of. And so Bitcoin is like the great teacher that forces you back to kindergarten in all these different topics. And mining for me was the same experience where it said, oh, you think you know about the world around you. Fool, and then it sends you back. It makes you learn from first principles around energy, around power markets, physics, history, the same way that Bitcoin did. So Bitcoin made me learn about the history of money. Mining made me learn about the history of ports and cities, and how does a young country, being that we're in a relatively young country compared to your balmy isle. How does a new place develop, and what are the design decisions that get put into sort of the emergent concept that was America, and how are those emergent design decisions playing themselves out for us today in a brand new industry? So it's been fun.
Well, it's this thing of calling Bitcoin this organic creature that just seems to be growing into this thing that all these areas we didn't expect, that we didn't realize, that we didn't see coming. And I mean, I said it on the pod a bunch of times. I'm most excited about the unknown unknowns, the things that are going to come out in the future that Bitcoin or mining does that nobody could think about, that nobody could prepare for. Like the show we made with Adam Wright the other day, where we have an issue with climate change at the moment. Some people disagree. I think we do. 41 degrees in the UK is a new record by some 2 degrees. And the new records every year. We do have a climate issue. I'm sorry, scientists are right. Shut the fuck up. And, whether you agree with it or not, or whatever you think we should be doing about it, there is an indisputable fact that if you can go to a landfill site, put miners there, and turn methane into Bitcoin, it doesn't matter what you think of climate change. That is an industry that economically works and is good for the climate and creates Bitcoin. Nobody saw this shit coming. Well, how did?
Yeah. That's the beauty of a market. When you offer a difficult human problem up to a market, talk about the emergent, sort of the untethered growth of what Bitcoin looks like today versus some number of years ago. What's so great about it is that Bitcoin was born out of a extreme human problem, which was the moral hazard of governments being continuous bailouts in 2009, and an inventor or discoverer, depending on what you think of Bitcoin's origin story, looked at this problem of never-ending bailouts and said, there's a way to change money, and I believe that my discovery or my invention is going to be compelling enough to win value in the marketplace of monies. And so what I think we're seeing today is the bolted on second order effect of that decision to create a monetary good that can compete on the merits with other monies. And what we found is that a lot of people said, yes, this is working. We want to choose this one. And so it's commanding sufficient purchasing power to be able to then turn its eye of Sauron onto another industry, an emerging human problem, which is we want to live in a beautiful planet and get to enjoy the abundance of advanced technology and not have to suffer the externalities of that enjoyment. And so what this superior monetary good is saying to that problem is it's saying, you guys are leaving a whole ton of meat on the bone. The way you do things today is wildly inefficient, and I'm going to prove to you how inefficient your current behavior is with a market mechanism, because rewarding you for being efficient with your usage and efficient with your energy generation is going to be far more valuable when I pay you some percentage of these 900 new Bitcoin every day. And there's a lot of, entrepreneurial young souls who are looking at that opportunity, or maybe older souls, and looking at that opportunity and saying, I want those Bitcoin, and I think I know how to get them, and I think I can introduce a net positive by doing so, and I think that my idea is the best in the marketplace because you're utilizing something that's naturally occurring and introducing a negative externality, methane in the atmosphere. Nobody's saying it's good. And by solving this problem and getting paid to do so, what I'm not trying to do is argue to pass some bill through a legislative body of 80-year-olds. I'm just going to go and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to get paid to do it, and I'm going to solve your problem.
And it's starting to flip the narrative. It's becoming harder and harder for people to claim that Bitcoin is bad for the environment, which they're still doing. It still exists. There's articles in the press, and there's certain senators or Congress people are saying it, but it's flipping. I mean, we had it the other day. Who was that? The one where Senator Lummis replied to?
That was Todd Right.
No, she replied to another senator, didn't she?
Senator Durbin.
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant when she quote tweeted that.
Yeah. Go and find out what he said.
Yeah.
Let me push you.
Yeah.
Because I'm sensing a vibe shift.
I am.
The vibe shift is that Bitcoin is not bad for the environment. The vibe shift is that Bitcoin takes the energy and you have no right to it.
Wow. This is moving goalposts. This is control freaks wanting to move the goalposts. This is, I hate Bitcoin. I can't give you a rational reason why, but I'm just going to keep moving the goalposts just to argue that case.
Because I really do think 6 months ago or 12 months ago, the narrative was Bitcoin is creating emissions. And today, I think the narrative is Bitcoin is taking energy from deserving uses. Yeah,
which also is patently not true. It's an even weaker argument.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could make the argument against Bitcoin for the environment. I can make that, and I can go and spread that to politicians and journalists and get those articles out there. You can do it because we have an environmental crisis. Some people believe, some people don't. Let's just be very clear. I know that we do know that I believe there is. We have an issue with a warming planet, and then people put that down to burning of fossil fuels. So it's very easy to make the link and go, well, these Bitcoin miners, they're wasting energy, they're causing coal plants to be fired back up, and they're using as much energy as Norway or some other bollocks, whatever measure they use, right, to make the argument. It's completely flawed, but you can make it in a way that somebody who isn't smart enough, who hasn't done the research, can put it out there. And we know it exists, and we know the influence it has, because when somebody puts out one of those tweets, under it you see all the no-coiners. You've never heard of Bitcoin or only know a little bit about Bitcoin, or repeating these things. I mean, I've had them. I've got into arguments with people who clearly don't know anything about Bitcoin, and then making the same argument. So what's that thing? It takes how much time to undo a
It's like
statement?
you need 7 positives for 1 negative or something.
Yeah, undo that bullshit. But you found it.
I can't find the original tweet. I can find her response.
Well, if you found a response,
It's
isn't it?
Senator Dick Durbin.
Yeah, I'm on his thing, but I can't find the actual original tweet.
Has he deleted it?
Maybe. It doesn't look like it though. She responded sort of in a separate thread, and she posted a load of like Darren Feinstein and the.
I thought she retweeted him at the start of that thread.
No, it's not in there. Unless it has been deleted. I don't know.
That would be funny if he deleted it.
It's fun when the censors turn to self-censorship.
What? It's fun when a senator turns around to another one and gives them straight up facts.
And you know, I know that it's frustrating, and I know that sometimes it feels like not all parties are created equal when it comes to digesting information about Bitcoin. But this is really an exciting time to be observing American politics, because Bitcoin is the first bipartisan issue that I've ever seen in like years and years and years and years. It's crossing the aisle in really interesting ways, and it's forcing conversation to the surface that hasn't happened. You know, I think we've got lots of crises in these challenging modern times, but one of the pressing crises that I see is a crisis of debate, where there's a lot of very tricky problems in front of us. I think that, you know, the world is a complicated place, and answers are not obvious. And the way to get to better answers is to have better conversations, and the way to have better conversations is to have people who don't agree talk.
I found that tweet, by the way. He said, "It's time to learn the truth about crypto. Let's start with the obscene amount of electricity needed to mine Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Families and businesses in America will pay the price for crypto's mining ventures."
So that is that vibe switch. Yeah, I see what you're saying there. Well, I'm going to push you back on the bipartisan. We believe it should be bipartisan, but it's not. There's definitely more of a leaning to the right of senators who have adopted or support Bitcoin, and some of the criticisms tend to come more to the left. But look, by the way, I'm with you. We did an interview the other day with a guy called Jason Meyer. He's writing a book, A Progressive's Case for Bitcoin. He's a teacher. Mm-hmm. He is a progressive, good guy. Reached out to us, said, "Look, I'm working on this book. Just want to tell you about it." And we're like, "Come on the show."
Yeah.
He had like 30 Twitter followers. Like, nobody knows him. Like, come on the show and tell me your story about this book. I put it up on Twitter, and some people replied with, "Bitcoin is antithetical to left-wing ideology. This is dumb. He first has to get over the idea of stop stealing people's money," all these things. And my point back to every one of those is, if you're from the right, forget the anarchists. If you're from the right, you should want this book written more than any other book. You can completely disagree with people on the left, but you do not want them using this as a political argument. You want them on side on this. Fucking argue about everything else, but just have them on side with Bitcoin. Do you see what I'm saying?
I definitely see what you're saying. I also think that I come at it differently.
Okay.
That I think that what Bitcoin does really effectively is it is a return to accountability. And one thing that really frustrates me around the current political climate is that there's just a total lack of accountability between representatives and constituents. And I think that Bitcoin has the opportunity, and Bitcoin-related issues has the opportunity to force a much higher degree of accountability between those elected to represent us and the constituents that they represent, because for a few reasons. The first is that Bitcoin is such a high compression of time that if you send someone to office with an anti-Bitcoin policy and they stay, if you're a senator, you get a 6-year term. Think about what Bitcoin was like 6 years ago. It changes very, very rapidly. And so if you come to office, you say, I'm running on a 100% anti-Bitcoin platform, and I get elected. And halfway through, maybe Bitcoin reveals itself to many of the constituents who elected that person and said, whoa, I changed my mind. This thing's clearly doing all of this incredible humanitarian good all over the world. This thing is improving markets. It's improving people's lives everywhere, which I think it is. Maybe we need to change our approach. Most other times, you never see the impact of the platform that you send someone to Washington to advocate for within the context of the term that they were sent there on. And so there's this opportunity for Bitcoin to hold representatives really deeply accountable for the choices that they make, because the other part about Bitcoin evolving so rapidly is that if you don't get involved and start your process, you get left behind really fast.
I think that's hopeful. We had well,
sorry.
Well, we had politicians send us into an illegal war in Iraq that became very clear afterwards that was based on lies and bullshit and had nothing to do with any weapons of mass destruction that existed. It was all lies. We were taking an illegal war. 1.5 million people died, right? That to me is a war crime. Bush, Blair should have been at The Hague and tried for war crimes. Why did you lie? And why did you send us into an illegal war? Tony Blair is now somebody who goes around and gives expensive dinner speeches and gets paid a lot of money. He gets consulted on a lot of important things by different groups, and I don't know, and follow their bullshit. Pretty sure George Bush is just playing golf and cooking barbecue. We don't hold these people accountable. They get away with their bullshit again and again and again. And I think in the now, what we've got is people who are essentially lying about Bitcoin because either they're uninformed or they're just disingenuous. And the problem with these people is that when people tend to argue over partisan issues, they tend to repeat the things that the opinion leaders in their space say, whether that is a politician or that is a journalist. They will just repeat their talking points. Mm-hmm. Most of the people I'm arguing on Twitter, I'm repeating the talking points they've read in The Guardian or some bullshit there. Now we have a guy on their team saying, you're completely right. This book, by the way, this book isn't to convince people from the right to become lefties. This book is to deal with FUD that comes from the left, from a guy on the left saying, here, this is where you're misinformed.
I commend the effort. I'll read the book.
You don't need convince it.
Yeah, but I'll at least buy the book.
But what I'm saying, the point I'm trying to make is like, nobody on the right should be scared of this book. They should support this book because it's educating people who are different from you on why Bitcoin is good.
Totally. I think that if I had to put myself in the shoes of the person on the right who would argue against that, they're saying that any compromising on any ideology that is not absolutist disqualifies you from participation in the conversation. And I think we see this behavior elsewhere in the Bitcoin community. I think we see this issue elsewhere in the American political system. I think that at the end of the day, the more you're able to have a true North Star around your own life and your family's life and the prosperity that you can bring to the world, the happier you'll be. And my recommendation for those people is to spend less time on Twitter.
And come to the UK. You should come to the UK. I should take you around.
I would love to see you.
I can show you how everyone just kind of gets along. We're very civil. We drink tea. We don't really argue. We just do it behind your back. All right, man. Listen, I want to talk about mining a bit more. So I haven't paid too much attention because we were traveling, but I was aware there was a heat wave in Texas, quite a serious one. And there were questions around asking people to conserve energy. We've all been looking at ERCOT thinking, this is a great case study for Bitcoin, integrating Bitcoin in the grid. How did it stand up? Because I'm assuming you've paid close attention to it.
Yeah. So what's been really fascinating to see is that about 1 gigawatt of capacity was given back to the ERCOT grid during much of this time.
What does that mean in real numbers?
1% of that grid.
Okay.
Which is enormous, right? So if the energy system can of base load doesn't change. So to be able to see 1% of the total energy system, which is probably 2 to 3% of the ERCOT baseload, curtail is really like pretty impressive.
How many machines would that be about if they were S19s?
It would be 300,000.
300,000. Wow. Holy So there's that many machines plugged in to.
Yeah, there's probably about 300,000 machines plugged in.
That's insane.
across those sites.
Before mining, what would have done that? What would have been that demand response?
Blackout.
It's like an entire nuclear reactor.
Wow.
Like a nuclear reactor is somewhere between 800 and 1200 megawatts typically.
And so anyone who's not listened to the previous shows we've done on this, just trying to explain to them what this actually means, what these machines are doing. They're allowing for an increase in the base load?
Yeah. So the way that energy systems work is that there's like on the supply side and the demand side, there's like two major behaviors. There's fixed generation, baseload generation, and there's baseload offtake consumption. And then there's variable generation and variable consumption. So for instance, baseload generation would be like a nuclear plant or a lot of the coal or nat gas plants that are out there, not wind or solar, because those have intraday peaks and valleys. Similarly, on the consumption side, the lights in your house or your HVAC, depending on the season, the things that run low, consistently in the background, that's your base consumption. Variable consumption would be like your dryer.
I always remember there being like an anecdote in England that at the interval for Coronation Street, it would go up loads because everyone would put the kettle on.
Make a cup of tea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a northern problem, right?
Yeah, probably.
We don't watch Coronation Street. We watch EastEnders.
EastEnders, yeah.
But that's on the BBC where you don't have adverts.
I'm more a keeping up appearances guy.
But Mrs. Bouquet.
Oh, of course, Mrs. Bucket.
I can't believe you know who that is. How the fuck do you know who that is?
My parents raised me right.
Oh, man. So did you get Only Fools and Horses?
No. I watched them. I watched Faulty Towers.
Yes, Faulty Towers.
Blackadder.
Oh, my God. You got some good TV.
I have great parents.
That's where you get my humor.
Of course.
So 1%, that's a lot.
It's a lot. So when you think about what 1,000 megawatts is like, it's like a city. It's like a city going on or off. It's a tremendous amount of power, and the ability to have this on a variable basis relieves enormous cost to those ratepayers at the end of the day, because all those costs end up getting passed back eventually. And it lowers the stress on the system. It reduces the need for peaker plants. So when you think about, ERCOT wakes up in the morning and says, oh shit, there's way more demand than there is supply. They have two options. One is to go call the coal plant operators and say, fire it up, boys. The other is to go out into the open market and to pay a very high price for more power to basically import the power into your system. Because the people on the other side of that phone call know you're a forced buyer, and so they're going to take you to the edge of what you could possibly ever pay for that. So either way, it's bad, right? And what a curtailable piece of the load means that there's now 1,000 megawatts of capacity that don't have to get turned on at one of these high demand, whether it's diesel or coal or whatever the generation source is, or it's 1,000 megawatts that don't have to get overspent on in the open intergrid market and then get ported in. And oh, by the way, if you look at the geography of Texas, where is that power needed? It's needed in Austin and Houston and Dallas, which are southern. And so you got to move that power really far. And we know from past discussions that when you move power over a long distance, not all of it shows up. So you've got to overbuy for the power because it's coming from further away. There's lots of problems. Introducing a load like this to a system at the level of flexibility and the level of high frequency response time that Bitcoin miners are able to offer is unprecedented.
What have the miners swapped out in the system? Have they swapped out a need for, that demand response power, or have they increased the total amount of power being put into the system? And then,
so that's a tricky question.
Okay.
When new generation gets put into a grid, that's a multi-year planning process, because you've got to manage where that power is located. What are the zones? What's the infrastructure? What's the transmission? All the different types of upgrade and development downstream needs from, let's just say I build a new whatever generation plant. Plugging it in is hard. Getting approval to plug it in is hard. Making sure that it's all going to work is hard. So that's all kind of proceeding, that along the planning lines that happened in 2017, 18, 19, and 20. That's all kind of chugging along. The Bitcoin miners are a straight up reduction in demand.
Right.
So it's like going to the supermarket and the first 100 people who show up in the morning saying, we don't need to shop today.
Huh. And how how many miners could, how much power could the miners take in the system? Like, could they get to 10%? Would that be a good thing? 20%?
In Texas, there's probably not enough to go much more than we've already seen.
Right. Okay.
Because right now, I think that the demand response hours are probably more valuable than the mining hours during the most congested times.
Right. Okay. But there was no situation, say, if those miners weren't there, that the system would have failed. Or is there?
Well, it's tricky. So I can't say it wouldn't have failed. We don't know what would have happened, but the stress on the system would have been really quite significant. They would have needed to forced shutter. Rolling brownouts or blackouts in certain areas are a possibility.
What's
at that
a brownout?
point. A brownout is when you lose access to like firm power. So a brownout is like a partial shutdown. A blackout is like you've lost access to the transmission line.
So a blackout is literally the lights go out and everything goes out.
Everything goes out.
But a brownout, what does that mean? Intermittent or?
Yeah, it's like insufficiently stable power.
Right.
I'm sure they're like, who's going to DM us after this? It's going to be Blake. He's going to say, well, there's a technical definition.
Well, do you know what we say to Blake? You should have come on the fucking show. You had your chance. We asked you. You were busy. Can we get him on?
Yeah, I can DM him.
I like Blake. He's a good guy. I mean, this ERCOT thing's great. It's like super interesting. But do we know of any other grids who are now starting to look at this?
Well, California's been struggling for a long time.
Okay.
I don't think they're as constructive as ERCOT is. I think they've got different problems. I think that, what we're seeing is, how much have you paid attention to what's happened in Germany?
A lot.
Okay. So it sucks. It's not good.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of the terminal velocity of a lot of really, really bad energy policy.
Mm-hmm.
We are not in the same position as Germany, but we're on the same roller coaster.
You're not building any nuclear reactors? Haven't they just decommissioned their last one?
They're fighting to keep it open.
Okay. Has Schellenberg had anything to do with that? Because I know he's
a huge advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a woman who is a great, her title, she's a model, but she's a nuclear influencer.
A nuclear influencer.
Her tag on Twitter is isodope.
That's brilliant. Isodope.
And she makes like pro-nuclear energy education TikToks.
Holy shit. We need to get
I'm
her
following
on.
it. I think we need to get her on.
She's awesome. Isabel Boemeke. I can't, she's either Dutch or German maybe.
Yeah.
Dan's got a big smile on his face at the moment.
I just think it's funny.
Yeah.
That's all.
So, don't worry. Your wife started to listen to the show.
Yeah, she doesn't listen.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think like, talk about bipartisan issues, like to me, where we go from here is like, there is no palatable political position that is not pro Bitcoin and pro nuclear power.
Yeah. So we're starting to dig into this. We've actually started to dig into this because I look across all of this. I want to understand it all. Look, I accept there's a climate issue. I also accept we have a massive issue with not allowing people to generate energy. Like, energy is important for humans to flourish. I get it.
And the bad that will come from unstable power grids and increasingly volatile access to energy and increasing price. Because let's be very, very, very clear. In Germany right now, it's not only that they are starting to have power rationing come to the market. They're also paying 3 times as much for what they're getting.
Yeah.
So if you told the average American household that your utility bill is about to triple,
get me that nuclear shit. Get Mr. Burns in.
How transferable is it though? Like to take what they've done at ERCOT and do it elsewhere? Because it's like an isolated grid, right? At ERCOT.
So I think that it's important that we clarify exactly what you mean, what they've done in ERCOT. The demand response and presence of miners.
Yeah, and sort of integrating that with the grid.
I think that's very achievable everywhere.
Okay.
Hold on. What is the deal between the grid and the miners?
So in Texas, there's some unusual dynamic. There's two driving forces behind why Texas is an attractive place to mine Bitcoin, based on this sort of grid integration thing that's been kind of at the center of a lot of the conversation. The first is that it is a fully deregulated market. So granular, hour to hour, real time pricing, bid in, bid out. So if let's just say I buy a forward contract for 1 day of power, or 1 month of power at $25 a megawatt hour, and then the price spikes, I can choose to give that power back and make the difference. I can't do that in New York City. Why? Because it's not a deregulated power market. So there's a group in the government called FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They govern all power generation assets everywhere in the U.S. other than ERCOT because it's deregulated. And so the first piece is the ability to interact on a very granular basis with the power. The second is that there's this other thing called demand response. And other grids in the U.S. have demand response programs. The revenue from demand response programs in Texas is just higher, right? There's more volatility. There's more congestion. It has to do with how the state is laid out and the load zones and all this other stuff. But the net of it is that if you're a miner in Texas and you participate in a demand response program, there's more revenues available to you out of a program like that there than elsewhere.
And is that because you get power cheaper, but on the condition that you turn it off at a certain point?
You get paid to give the power back.
You get paid to give it back. And at the time you give it back, do you get paid more than you get to mine?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
You can.
And I guess, does the miner have a choice? Like they have to offer them the...
So there's different programs.
Right.
Sometimes you can get put to give the power back. Sometimes it's voluntary. Sometimes it's you need to give back a certain number of hours. There's other
everything is up for grabs.
It's very complicated.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of opportunity around intermittent consumption in ERCOT that's more attractive than elsewhere.
So back to the nuclear thing, because again, we're starting to look at that now. We want to get some people on nuclear. We want to understand it more.
I have people.
Okay, give us your people, because there was Mark Andreessen was on Rogan talking about it as well. Schellenberger's been talking about it. Lots of people are talking about nuclear, and I did some research and I was trying to understand why people are against nuclear. And look, there are natural super green people who are going to be against this. Of course, I get it. They think of nuclear waste and it scares the shit out of them and yada, yada. But we've actually gone into the detail. We looked at it. So just a couple of eye-opening things that at Fukushima, one person died. Mm-hmm. And that's even under dispute. With Chernobyl, what was it, like 26, 32, something?
It was something like that, yeah.
These aren't great. Every death is horrible. And there's been these other externalities, like the region of Chernobyl is a no-go zone. And lots of people got cancers and things. Again, it's all terrible. But if you actually compare what the impact of burning coal and what that's done to the environment and certain lung diseases as well, like, let's be realistic. There are consequences and risks of them all. But the benefits, it appears to me, on nuclear far, far outweigh the risks of any burning of a fossil fuel to generate almost unlimited clean power.
Yes.
It doesn't make any sense.
So let me take you back even a further step behind nuclear, which is that this idea in modern times that we can't have access to as much energy at a very low cost that we want is false. We can have as much as we want. We just need the will to invest in it. We need the time and the effort to improve the technology. The technology doesn't need to be improved to get there, but I think about, when you think of the sort of the Moore's law cycles, right? NVIDIA, when they released their GPU for the first time in the earlier 2000s, they were releasing a new chip size and software every 6 months. We're on version 4 of nuclear reactors, 70 years later. It took us 70 years to get to version 4. If NVIDIA was doing it, it would have taken them 2 years.
Right, okay.
So we're 140 times slower in nuclear than we are in chips.
But is it slightly different in that when you're making a chip, the external risks of a bad chip or designing a bad chip are small, whereas the external risks of designing a nuclear power plant in the wrong way, you might get nuclear meltdown. And so I expect a bit longer. But what it sounds like to me is like hardly any new nuclear plants are being built or commissioned. You found 2 in the UK.
Well, I had a quick look. There seems like there's quite a lot coming over the next few years. I don't know if like India are building 7 or something over the next 5 years.
There's 4 coming in the UAE. 2 of them are done, 2 to come. It's a 4 reactor development. There's 2 that are being worked on in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And then the UK has some that are coming. I know that Poland is actively engaging in working on some of this. India obviously is working on it. China is very aggressively working on this.
The US isn't.
The US is. The US is
have a couple.
Yeah. So
Right.
the US is working on something called an SMR, which is a small modular reactor. Think about.
Is that like a regional?
So right now in nuclear, if I go and say I'm going to go build a nuke, right? What that means in the US is a light water reactor. You're going to build it. It's going to need, there's a 2.5 mile containment zone and a 10-mile containment zone. It takes an enormous amount of land. Nobody wants one near them. It's a pain in the ass. That nuclear reactor would generate somewhere between 800 and 1,200 megawatts. You want to build them two together because then when one is getting refueled, the other one's spinning. So the site is never fully down.
By the way, you know far more than this me. What do you mean refueled and one is spinning?
So like if you build a nuclear reactor, you want to have two big turbines. Each one of them has nuclear material in them. That's how you do the heating and then the spinning.
I have no idea.
How do you think a power plant works?
They burn shit.
Okay. So
they burn coal.
I've never seen Harry look so disappointed.
Spins a turbine. The turbine generates energy. Yep.
So in a light water reactor, you use a nuclear fissile material.
Yeah.
Generates a shitload of heat. Heat turns water into steam. Steam rotates.
Huh.
When you refuel a nuclear reactor, you put new fissile material in the core, and then it burns hot again.
Right.
And then it keeps spinning. So, but you're doing all this stuff, all this maintenance, all this monitoring, all these things. So if you have two turbines, two reactors, when one of them is getting refueled, you have to turn it off to refuel it.
Yeah.
The other one is on, keeping the whole plant working.
And you get rid of all the waste shit.
Exactly. So it's like redundant stuff.
Okay. And so when you said, so do they not ever have the two running at the same time?
They always have
they
two, but they can turn one down and not lose any plant operations.
Right. So when you talk about those two,
mm-hmm.
if you were talking about the entire grid of Texas, just for perspective, how many nuclear?
You could run Texas right now on somewhere between 70 and 100 nuclear turbines.
Okay, so that's a lot. But how many turbines can you have on one site?
There's sites some sites have 4.
Okay. So still a lot. There's still to power all of America, you're going to need thousands.
You would need
maybe 1,000.
Yeah, you'd need probably about 1,000.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is not that many. And when you think about like all the money that we've plowed into wind and solar, if we just spend that money on nuclear, we'd be way further ahead.
Yeah. I think there is going to be this shift.
I totally agree.
I was actually reading New Scientist about these new fission reactors that they're working on. There's one that's being developed, but they said it's probably be completed in about 2054.
So if you're going to go with the new technology stuff, there's a range of technologies between ones that are like readily available right now and ones that are like fundamentally solving like big physics problems that are new physics problems. Like those are like 30 years out.
Yeah, I don't know the difference between fusion and fission. All I know is about spinning some plasma shit.
So
the stuff that we got at the start of the universe.
Fission
sounds cool.
Things break apart.
Yeah.
Fusion, things forge together.
Like the sun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like in the sun.
Stop laughing at me, dickhead. Daddy's laughing at me.
The elements go from like the lighter elements to the heavier elements. In fission, you go from the heavier elements to the lighter elements.
Why is fission seen as cleaner?
Fusion is seen as cleaner.
Fusion.
So in fusion, you take two things and you put them together. In fission, things break apart, but they go from being useful and dangerous to not useful and still dangerous.
So fission is what we have now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about a fusion.
Fusion is the next thing.
Yeah. So 2054 for the first one.
It's going to take some time.
It's going to take some time. You got some shit to figure out.
Smarter than me, you're working on it.
Maybe I could help them. But look, I've not spent any time looking at nuclear. I'm just starting to look at this. I want to talk to people. I want to understand it more. It just sounds to me like it's the sensible route. And anybody who's against it is a moron and will probably not be in power.
Yeah. So to me, nuclear is just a fundamentally apolitical, technological, human net benefit.
Yeah, but it's not an apolitical issue if you're from the greener end of the political spectrum. You can go out there, I've read everything they're saying against it.
Yeah. So their perspective is that their expectation is that human quality of life should be worse and that is the only version of reality that's acceptable to them.
Well, their version of reality is the risks aren't worth it.
Their reality is that every risk is not worth it.
That's true.
But I think there's, in places like Germany, I think there's some PTSD from Chernobyl still. Like if that could have been significantly worse for them.
If the winds are blowing the other way.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, something to do. They got lucky. I have to look up. They got lucky with Chernobyl to do with the way the wind was blowing.
You need to bring on someone who's smarter on nuclear than me.
Well, okay, man.
We're going to do that in Bedford.
Yeah, we can do that in Bedford. We're going to get Bedford's nuclear expert.
I thought that was you.
No, it's Mad Ricky. Mad Ricky plays the banjo down the high street. Have you found it?
No, I love
It's
that.
something to do with
it's
something to do with the winds. They got very lucky.
There is risk with everything.
Uh-huh.
The prevailing and overwhelming fear around nuclear is a function of narrative and marketing, not a function of scientific
It's
reality.
been successful marketing then this last couple of decades.
I blame The Simpsons.
It's a fair point, actually.
Like if
The three-eyed
if we just
fish.
didn't have Blinky the three-eyed fish, we would have abundant power everywhere at a penny a kilowatt hour.
I want three-eyed fish. I personally think
To
three-eyed
eat.
fish are cool. Why not? Might be good. This guy nonsense. All right, man. Okay, so listen, price has been a bit shitty. And we're reading about some miners are in distress. Hut 8 are coming out. Shout out to Jamie. How you doing, Jamie? They're still keeping every Bitcoin they mine, but we've heard of distressed sellers. I think the lowest the price hit was what, 17.5?
Yeah, 17,700 or something.
Yeah, we saw a dip to there. We're back up to like 22 now. But like in my head, my basic rough calculations, having spoken to you, there should be no miner none of the big miners should be losing money on mining Bitcoin at 22K at the moment, not even at 17. So what is happening there? Is there like other structural issues with these companies?
So the short answer is, and this is only from my layman's observation of the industry, I think there's not one thing. It's not just one thing that's happened. So you can look at some who, maybe there's some miners who, actually, before we go there, the big thing is that these are not miners necessarily who are unprofitable at the end of the month on their bills. These are miners who thought that they either had access to additional capital, were funding expansion, were paying for future orders of machines. These are, a miner's not selling their Bitcoin reserves to cover their power bill at the end of the month. In these examples, I think much more so, these are miners who are saying, okay, we've planned for X, Y, and Z amount of growth. The way that we're going to get there and finance that growth has changed given the changing market dynamics. We are choosing to liquidate some of our balance sheet to go and fund that growth.
So they're selling them to go and buy machines that they thought would be bought by capital investment.
Well, and let's play out an example. You wake up in the morning, it's November of 2021, you call your Bitmain sales representative and you say, I want to buy one machine. And they say, okay, this machine costs $75 a terahash. You look at the market today, you say, it's trading at about $100 a terahash. So if I'm going to get this thing in 90 days or 180 days or something, that's a great price. I pay you 35% of the price up front. I owe you another payment in the middle, and then I owe you another payment 30 days before it shows up. But Bitcoin goes from 50 whatever, 60 whatever to 17 whatever, 20 whatever over that time period. And so what you thought was a great deal at $75 a terahash now is trading for $35 a terahash.
But you have a contract.
And so the people who lent you the money to go do that, or the people who bought your equity to go do that, are saying, calling you and saying, what the fuck? You're going to be paying over market price for something that you can only, every dollar you spend now is only worth 50 cents in mining assets. So it puts an enormous amount of pressure on how procurement happens within the mining industry. And so I don't know what any individual company situation is, but that's the dynamic that's challenging about some of these future orders, where miners go take out a loan, they're locked in at a price with a manufacturer, and then when it comes to take receipt of that machine or to make the next payment, the value of that machine is significantly below where the contract was struck. And so the people who finance that growth might say, I don't like this deal as much anymore.
Can they hedge that? Are there futures products they can hedge with?
There's a lot of thought and time that's gone into how some of the manufacturers, or sometimes the manufacturers introduce adjustable rate contracts. Sometimes there's opportunities to hedge Bitcoin price and get kind of part of the way there. But I think like what happened for a lot of the operators in the space is they said Bitcoin's going up forever. We went from basically we've gone through three kind of chapters. The first chapter was, oh my God, Bitcoin price is going up. I can't get any miners. The second chapter was, oh my God, we've got all of our miners, but there's no rack space. The third chapter is, oh my God, why did I do any of this in the first place?
But it's that thing. It's trying to build these businesses during volatile times. I remember back in, I'm going to get him on the show, Pascal from Ledger on the show, because I remember back during the 2017, 2018 bull run and then crash, he just said, building a company in these times, this kind of volatility is so hard because the majority of your orders come in a very short period of time. You have to provide customer service, and then the tap turns off. You don't know when, yada, yada. Now, they've had a very, very smooth, very, very smooth couple of years. And so it's because they learned everything during that period. We're the same. Look, everything is a derivative of Bitcoin. Our downloads are our businesses, and we've planned ahead for it. And, bear market won't affect the show that we make. We can still travel and make it. But that's come through good planning. I think other people just haven't been prepared for this.
And I agree with you. We think similarly. We think that Bitcoin is a multi-decade, multi-generational, incredible opportunity. Doesn't mean that the water's always warm and smooth. There's chop along the way, and so planning for those downside scenarios and trying to manage risk first and upside second is the prudent way to do it. And there's operators and companies that are out there within our industry that have done their best and made good conservative decisions and still blown up.
Is there distressed deals out there for the miners? Are you looking at things? Like a shark. A vulture.
I have yet to meet a market that doesn't have opportunity. I think every market's got great opportunities in it. I think that, discerning capital allocators tend to rise to the top over time. And it's about process and rigor much more than it is around kind of, anything sharky.
The empathetic vulture.
The SBF.
You catch more bees with honey, my friend.
Oh man. Well, listen, look, it's super interesting again to watch, to see this play out, because I would have thought more than anyone the miners would be prepared. Yeah, they seem to be so diligent on their numbers, but I guess what you're saying is right. Look, they can't produce the ASICs quick enough. During a bull market, the manufacturers hold the power.
I think it's changing. I think that the level of maturity that we see from existing manufacturers and some net new manufacturers, in this cycle is more mature than it was in 2017 and 18.
Do you think we will see consolidation though?
I think we have to.
And do you think there's any risk of having consolidation in the mining industry where we get a few huge players? Is there a decentralization risk with that? I asked somebody who wants to grow a massive company.
I'd love to be telling you that Bitcoin's decentralization risk has hit zero. I think that mining risk is pretty low. I think that miners are there's not a lot of incentive for bad behavior among miners, frankly. I think that our job is to produce computing power as efficiently as possible, and hand it off to other people who know what to do with it better than we do. And that happens in the form of pools, and that happens, over time. And I'm very bullish about kind of the improvements around, Stratum V2 and some of the stuff that's gone on from a pool decentralization standpoint. I also think that as markets for hash rate mature, it's also another synthetic decentralization of Bitcoin mining, where let's say you're running a farm with 100 terahash, and someone buys 2 terahash from you. Well, now you've got a contractual obligation to deliver them that hash rate in a certain way on a certain timeline. And so as we see, sort of more mature financial products around hash come to market, I think that the ability for miners to behave badly continues to go down.
It feels like there's some synergies with the way energy is bought and sold in the deregulated Texas market to what you will see will happen with the market for buying and selling hash. And do you think that's an alignment between the two that's happening?
I think that where Bitcoin and energy's relationship goes from here is one of the most underappreciated and underpriced things that's happening in this market. I've been watching the conversation around and I'm taking your question in another direction. I've been watching the discussion around the long-term, security budget conversations happen, and I just kind of think they're silly, right? Like there's two things that I think make Bitcoin's long-term viability brighter than ever today. The first is that the purchasing power of Bitcoin continues to go up on a cycle-by-cycle basis, right? We're not crashing to 3K. We're crashing to 17.5.
Yeah, somebody asked me recently about that, and I said the only number long-term I care about is what is the lowest price Bitcoin hits each year. Not the highest. I mean, it's interesting, but the lowest price it hits each year, that is trending up.
It's trending up. So, so that's the first thing that I think is solving this this sort of, long-term incentive structure thing. The second is that, I just don't buy this idea that the full spectrum of the incentives for miners is captured by the block subsidy plus the transaction fees. I think that in the sort of the revenue space for miners and the role that miners will get to play within large and complex energy systems will unlock net new streams of revenue that are not related to on-chain Bitcoin disbursement. And so whether that comes in the form of services or financing or straight up energy trading, there's just a ton that's going to get unlocked because you've brought a new market participant to a space that didn't have one before, with new opportunities and business models to be built on top of it. I'm incredibly bullish on non-Bitcoin native mining revenues.
Yeah. So after the Adam Wright show we made, Rusty dropped me a DM and he said, the thing I like most about this is the idea when people are discussing, about long-term inflation, should it be considered? What they've missed out is that we will have mining as a service. But me and Danny were talking about that. If there was no block reward, we get to a stage where there's no block reward, and you were talking about these sites, such as the landfill sites, you would be paying for someone to take that methane and burn it and turn it into Bitcoin, but there's no Bitcoin to be created, so you might as well just burn it off. So all you really have access to is actually the transaction costs. Now, if there is still a small part which is coming from the block reward and some transaction costs, maybe you subsidize the difference by paying someone to burn off the methane. But if there's not enough coming from a block reward, what is the mining as a service? That's the one I can't figure out. What is mining as a service where there's low block reward and very minimal transaction fees? I can't figure that one out.
So, there needs to be some transition to transaction fees.
Yeah.
But there is a native revenue opportunity to being a flexible grid balancer, right? Right now, if you go to Texas, there's negative power prices because it's more expensive to shut the turbine off and to turn it back on when you think about the maintenance and the labor and the negative impact to the infrastructure.
So you might as well have a toaster on.
It is immediately positive sum just to offtake the energy.
But what if you didn't have that taken off the energy? How could you get rid of the energy? Is there no other way? Can you not just I don't know?
It ends up getting to somewhere, but the price continues to burn negative. So I look at it and say, all right, well, I've got a great, a Bitcoin mine is a huge capacitor.
Yeah.
So you look at it and you say, all right, well, this megawatt hour is negative $10. And you think, the market's kind of digesting it at negative 10. I show up and I bid negative 9. I'll take the 9, and I have the ability to do so at scale. All I need to do is just turn on my mine, take the power, turn it back off. And so there's 0 Bitcoin changing hands, and I got paid $9 for that megawatt hour.
Is there enough? I guess if enough miners were doing this, there becomes a limit to how many can go out and offer this.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the case. But more importantly, Bitcoin mining economics trends lower on a multi-decade basis.
Yeah.
My main focus is how do we make Bitcoin more useful? because the more useful Bitcoin gets, the more on-chain transactions there will be, and the higher the purchasing power of a SAT goes. If I focus on those two things and build a great business to mine Bitcoin alongside of those activities, then the emergent technological phenomenon that is money, that is Bitcoin, gets to continue to grind forward, and humanity will prosper along the way.
How much are you guys thinking forward now about the next halving? Obviously, it's something that is relevant to you. The block reward will halve. Now, if the price has doubled from now, at that point, great. But like, how much are you forward thinking about that? Because the halving seems to get front run, but also there are very good arguments that it's narrative driven, it's momentum driven. Now, like, fucking great if it happens again. Sweet. But like, how much do you have to start thinking, or when do you have to start thinking about that? And are you already thinking about that? And I know, look, if the price doesn't go up, the most inefficient miners will go offline first. We'll lose all the, I don't know, are there still any S9s out there?
There still are.
Well, they'll all be gone. Fuck them. See you later. And then some of the most unprofitable mining. I know the network readjusts, but still, how much are you guys planning and thinking about that?
We take a pragmatic approach to risk. We don't want to overplan, because then you forget to build things. Yeah. We don't want to underplan, because then the water goes out and your pants are down, and neither is a good place to be, right? So it's a healthy concern. The best way to plan for the halving is to control the shit out of your costs.
Okay, and you're doing that. How big is Griid now? How much can you tell us?
Very little.
Just to jump back in the conversation a little bit, do you think next bull run, the same business plan will be the one, like hold every Bitcoin you mine, or do you think it'll be to offload periodically?
I think that I don't think it's one or the other. I think that when we see further, we've seen both strategies, right? We see, some miners who sell every day. We see some miners who raise money to pay bills to keep more Bitcoin. And we've seen both of those strategies make money at different times in different parts of the cycle. We've seen those, companies be rewarded in different ways by the market. I think that the burden of that decision is on shareholders and stakeholders to tell the management teams running those companies if they want to pay them to become a Bitcoin holding vehicle, or if they want to pay them to be a cash flow generating business and reward them on the stability of those cash flows. And I think there's plenty of shareholders who want both of those different options.
Good answer.
Okay, outside of mining, before we finish up, long term, Harry, your long-term Bitcoin thesis. I know you said to me before we started, your investment thesis is unwavering. You're a Bitcoin maxi, but like, how do you feel like the trajectory of Bitcoin is going now in terms as a whole, when you look at everything that's happened, whether it's regulation, adoption, technical development? Do you think we're moving well? Do you think we're moving at the right pace? Is there anything you look at and you think, here's an area we need to focus on more?
I'll tell you sort of my first principled approach, which is that if I think I'm right and that the world is wrong, then I have to ask myself, how am I going to vastly monetize my correct opinion? Because if I can't think of a good way to monetize my opinion, I might not be right. And so I look at, because the market's usually faster and smarter and better than me at deciding what reality is. So, when I look at Bitcoin and the process and the progress that we've all kind of been on the same pirate ship together figuring out, I think we're making great progress. I think Bitcoin is working for people who choose to find out how to best work with it. Could we be nicer to each other? And could we be, focusing more on education? And could we be building more interesting businesses? Yeah, probably. Do I think that if you it's funny. I was thinking recently about like when Bitcoin went back down to like 3,000 after it was up at 20 in 2017, 18.
It's brutal.
And I was thinking back and I was like, this might not work out. I don't know that this is going to really like work out. And like this time I'm like, all right, it's going to work out. It's going to be fine. And so it's interesting as the years go on and there's like the old saying in traditional finance, which is like, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. That is what really matters. I think that the quote unquote problem with Bitcoin is that it removes it doesn't reward your bias towards action, right? Human beings, to feel in control of our lives, we choose to do things, and that's how we feel in control. And what Bitcoin demands is that we don't do things.
Yeah.
And so, by nature of that behavior, it has forced its way out of more action biased hands into less action biased hands.
But it provokes us to do things. It tests us.
It is the cattle prod
like,
that revolves the world.
Listen, motherfucker, you might be wrong here. Just go and sell a bit of your Bitcoin.
So, I don't have sort of like a deep technical opinion on, are we far enough along? If you're worried about not being far enough along, write some code or fund someone else to write some code.
That's as simple as that.
It's the best I got. I don't know how to help you otherwise.
Well, listen, I know what you mean. I got to admit, when we hit down to 3,000, I was like, what if this doesn't come? What if nobody cares? What if we lose interest? What if this is just like some weird slow death? I was there.
Emotionally, that felt like this might just be dead. This cycle feels a lot more how I felt in 2008. I'm like, holy shit, I don't know what's going to break next.
We were let down by a crypto contagion.
Yes.
We just made a show with David Morris from CoinDesk. He wrote an article he was essentially saying, look, Bitcoin was born out of the 2008 financial crisis and meant to save us from this, and we've just done the same in crypto. And I say crypto not as a shitcoin. I say it because we cannot avoid the effects of leverage crypto funds going out and also buying Bitcoin. We can ignore crypto and we can say it's all bullshit. It still affects us.
Yeah.
But he was saying we've essentially repeated the same mistakes of 2008. We have over-leveraged, unregulated, greedy bastards creating a contagion for their own greed, with a few small people affecting a large group of people. And out of that, there's a lot of misery that's created.
I would put a finer point on it and say, like, let's talk about the mechanics of how that happens, right? Someone buys a Bitcoin. They send a Bitcoin to a counterparty. They take out a loan against that Bitcoin. They gamble with the proceeds of the loan. The thing that they gambled the proceeds on go up. Then the people who borrowed, who had the Bitcoin posted to them, lend out that Bitcoin somewhere else. Everything that happens until they do that last step is fine and doesn't affect Bitcoin. It's that last step when then they go and lend the Bitcoin back out, and then everybody blows up because the first loan breaks because prices go down. And then the second loan breaks because prices went down, and then prices go down further because there becomes this forced selling environment. Where if you've got to sell assets to meet a margin call, it sucks, but that's the end of the story. If you've got to sell assets to meet a margin call, and then your original lender also sold away all the collateral and can't get that back, that's when you get into contagion territory. It's that second layer of rehypothecation that happens into the collateral asset, not just the proceeds of the loan that gets spent gambling.
All right, Harry, man, listen, good to see you as ever. Do you want to pump Griid?
Have we not got to shit on Fort Worth first?
What's that? The first city to mine Bitcoin.
I commend them for taking such a bold and aggressive stance on Bitcoin in the future. I think what the Fort Worth story has shown us is that the cheapest political points in the world right now are pro-Bitcoin. If you just come out as super pro-Bitcoin, there are a bunch of people who are going to love you right away.
Yeah, you get 30,000 followers like that.
Like that. It does not matter how much hash rate you have actually committed to generating. So if you think about them from like a terahash per follower ratio.
What do they got? 2 S19s?
Yeah, it's not a lot. It's single digits machines. So is my guess.
So I'm probably mining as much.
Correct. So I think it's an incredible story that they're willing to take the plunge and be pro-Bitcoin in public. I think that the takeaway is that every other city and politician should try out a pro Bitcoin platform and see how well they do on Twitter.
See, this is positive leverage.
Mm-hmm.
This is just leverage.
It's just leverage.
Just leverage. Right, we are done now.
We are done.
We are done. Harry, good to see you, man. Do you want to pump Griid? Do you want to tell anyone anything? Where can they get any of this sweet merch? Or
No. Merch is the only thing scarcer than Bitcoin.
When do we get some of this sweet merch?
I can have a conversation.
I got a hat last time.
Your hat.
It's good.
I haven't got
Beanie. Beanie's good.
I haven't got a hat or a sweat.
We can change that.
We'll fix it up. All right, tell everyone.
We're Griid. We mine Bitcoin. I think that I'm going to use my plug space today just to say that things can get pretty bleak. They're going to be much better and sooner than you think.
Soon this will pass. All right, my brother. Love you, man.
Love
Take
you, bro.
care.
Thank you.